Mm.
All right. Well, welcome to the show, everyone. Today, I'm really delighted to be in the virtual studio here with Ruth Henderson, the power behind the Happy Saver podcast. How are you, Ruth?
I'm good. Great intro. Go easy on the power behind, but yeah.
Actually, I probably should have
No.
mentioned Johnny because Johnny is literally behind the door. He's probably the other power behind this podcast, isn't he?
Yeah, team effort. Team effort.
Cool. So why don't we start just by telling me a little bit about the Happy Saver podcast? Where did it come from? What was the genesis behind it?
It came about due to frustration, basically. I was trying to learn things about money because we had a mortgage and we paid it off. And it's like, holy moly, what do you do with the money now? So then I started seeking information as to what to do with the money that was left in the bank account. And that just led me on a big journey. And I'd come home and I'd say to Johnny, oh my God, I learned this, I learned that. And he said, why don't you tell other people that? He said, if you've just had this aha moment, that's probably useful for others. Why don't you do a blog? So a year later, after that, something like that, finally got around to it, and I just started blogging, and I just really started writing about what I was learning, what I was interested in, and I did it to save people the hassle, so that they didn't have to waste their time talking to banks, talking to this, that, and the next thing, that they could just learn from
Okay.
me, from my wins, and all that sort of thing. So that's how that came about, and I've been blogging. It's coming up to 7 years, Darcy. Can't believe it. And then we added the podcast, I think it was about 3 years ago. We're up to episode 80 now. And that was just because people email me all day long. I answer emails all day long. And people are so interesting. And they just, when they find someone to talk to about money with, i.e. me, they just can't stop talking. And they just want to have a chat about it. And I just thought, I'm so fortunate that I get to see this and read this. But I'm learning off them. How could I share their story with others? So that's when we started doing the podcast, and we just got to sort of keep trickling them out every other week.
That's an awesome origin story. So take me back to when you paid the mortgage off then. Was that something that was purposeful, planned, or was that an opportunity that came up? How did that come about?
Purposeful planned. Well, it kind of was in a way, because we lived in Wellington and we thought we might want to buy a house. That was in the back of our mind. Looked at Wellington houses. They were so expensive, Darcy. And this was like,
Mm,
how long ago? This was 16 years ago. No, it would have been 20 years ago, probably. So expensive then. And then we had an opportunity to come to Christchurch and for Johnny to start a company with a few mates. He's a graphic designer. And so we came down and we literally hit town and we were like, oh, well, let's buy a house now, sort of thing. And so that led us on a house hunt. And fortunately for me, Johnny's mum had said to him, because he was working full time by then, don't spend all your money, put some aside. So he had been paying into a managed fund, and he had what became our house deposit, basically. So we went shopping. He went to work. I went shopping, bought a house. And I remember at the time I had a new colleague, and I was looking in the $150,000 price bracket, and he was looking in the $300,000 price bracket. And I knew that we earned the same money because we started on the same day at this particular job. And I thought at the time, crikey, that's going to take him a lot longer to pay that house off. And therefore I thought the decision to buy a cheaper house from the get-go, that makes a lot of sense. So we went and bought this house. We got a mortgage from the bank, 80% fixed, 20% on floating. And then I started working. Johnny started making money in his company, and we paid off the floating part. And I thought, crikey, that wasn't so bad, was it? Bearing in mind, mortgages back then, we had $120-something thousand mortgage. So we sort of smashed that out. And then I went to the bank and I said, okay, can I pay more off? We had this 80% of it was fixed. And they're like, no, you signed a contract at this interest rate and its term is this long. Talk to us when that term expires. And I remember thinking at the time, well, that's just stupid. I've got the money. I want to pay it off. Why can't I pay it off? And that's when I thought, well, okay, I see how the banking industry works here. I did sign a contract. They're relying on this interest being paid. That's how it works. So when it did come up for renewal, we took the plunge. We put the whole lot on revolving credit, and then we just smashed it out. So all up, our mortgage the whole thing took us 5 years to pay off.
wow.
And knowing what I know now, Darcy, could have done it in half the time. half the time.
Amazing.
But
Just by
we
setting up
bought
the
new,
structure a bit differently. Yeah.
yeah. But we bought cars, we traveled internationally, we had a marvelous time, all that sort of stuff. But I wish I
Yeah.
knew then, you would hear this all the time too. Wish I knew then what I know
Wish I
now.
knew then what I know now,
Oh,
right?
yeah. When you pay off a mortgage, you get to keep your whole income, which is quite remarkable. And then I thought, what am I going to do with that income? And then I just started looking for ways to. I didn't want to buy another house. I knew then I didn't want to buy another house, so we just
Sure.
started growing our knowledge from there as to what to do next.
Sure. And are you still in that place now in Christchurch? Or are you somewhere else now?
No,
Okay.
no. So we stayed in that house in Christchurch. We got itchy feet, as every Kiwi I find does. They pay off their mortgage, and then it's almost like you miss that regular mortgage payment of that money comes out. It feels like you're doing something. And so we started looking around and we drove all over Christchurch looking for bigger, better. We were going to sell our house and we were going to upsize to something else because that's just what we wanted to do. And in hindsight, that's what everybody else kind of does as well. Long story short, we couldn't find anything we liked more than the house we had. So we stayed, and we were in the midst of a big renovation of it when the earthquake struck. And we were in Dallington and Christchurch, which is eastern suburbs. And within, oh gosh, it took a very long time. It was a big, long old deal. But we got red zoned and our house got compulsorily acquired by the government. And then it took it's probably 3 odd years that we got paid out by our insurer. And at that point, I was getting a pretty firm grip on what supply and demand means in the housing market. And we went looking to build or buy another house in Christchurch. And basically, it was like, I am not spending that amount of money on what you're offering me here. Surely there's an alternative. And we were stressed out because of earthquakes and all that. So Johnny quit his job. I wasn't working because we had our child. And
Right.
we just spent every other weekend, we'd get in the car and we'd drive around the South Island looking for somewhere to go. And that's how we
Wow.
came across
Okay.
Central Otago and moved to Alexandra about 10, 11 years ago. I think we moved here now.
And that's a beautiful spot down there.
It's pretty good.
Paint the picture though a little bit more. So we're in Christchurch, halfway into the process, or maybe you've started the renovation. You've got a very small child at that stage. Earthquakes hit. You were heading down one direction, and now you're deflected. And that must have been a really difficult time, though.
It was pretty crappy. And I remember, Darcy, that we'd decided to. So the earthquakes all happened, and it was a slow moving freaking freight train, is what that whole thing was. But I
Right.
remember, and I've talked about this a few times in my blog, that Johnny was working, I was handling all the money, and I'd learned about emergency funds. I'd built up this cash buffer and all that sort of stuff. And I remember walking with him along the Avon River, and I said to him at the time, I don't know what the future holds. I don't know where we're going to live. I don't know what we're going to do for work. I don't know where we're going to go. But I know we've got enough money, and that always makes me emotional when I talk about it. But that money's not our problem. Everything else is our problem. But I can assure you that money is not our problem. And so because of that foundation, you can just take a deep breath. And it's like we could make decisions that were in the interests of our family, of our mental health, and that sort of thing. So that was huge. And
Yes.
then using that emergency fund, what we actually did as well, and I'd forgotten about this until recently, but we just wanted to get out. And so we went to America, went on a holiday to America. And Johnny reminded me that we went to the Air New Zealand booking office or whatever we did. It was very short notice. We said, we want to go to the States and we want to go next month. And the lady said, oh, how can you afford that? And apparently I said to her, well, we've got a rainy day fund and it's absolutely pissing down. So yeah,
That's
Johnny
cool.
always remember that. So we went overseas, and when we came back, that's when we really took it, we got away from it and we decided what to do next. And that's when we started making our way south. So
Awesome. And so you got into Alexandra, you purchased a home.
no,
Presumably you wanted, no, you didn't.
this is why I don't know if you've ever read or watched much of my content, but I'm not into housing. A house to me is shelter. It's a place for my whānau to be safe and happy. And the reason I feel so strongly about that one of the reasons I feel strongly about that is with our house in Christchurch, we owned it outright. So we had an asset worth 450,000, whatever it was, and that money was locked up tight for a good 3.5 years until insurers could agree, agencies could agree, this, that, and the next thing could agree. So basically, we bailed out of Christchurch without having any certainty over housing. We just knew that the government would acquire our property. We just didn't know what the end value would be. Our insurer paid a year's rent. So we moved down into Alexandra. We rented a house and we bought a section, which is where I'm talking to you from. And then we kind of waited, and then insurers said, you can have this much, changed our mind. You can have that much, changed our mind. It was awful. But eventually we ended up with $435,000, I think, was our settlement in the end. And using that money, that's what we bought the section with, and we built a house for. So, and then last year, so we just wanted done with it. So we just said, give us our money, thanks, we'll move on. But last year, there was some couples in Christchurch who fought and fought and fought. They were not happy with the settlements they were offered. And it was because of those incredible people that last year we got an additional insurance payout, 10 years after the event, of $68,000. So housing to me is the most illiquid, pain in the butt asset I could ever own. Yeah. And my take on money and investing is I want my house worth as little of my net worth as possible. That's the direction we're trying to head into.
Okay, and that's kind of like the crux of what I wanted to really dig into as well, is your attitude around housing. So we live in a country where housing really is put up on a pedestal, and I think for many everyday investors, housing or the equity in housing would probably be quite a substantial portion of their portfolio. And you have viewed it, maybe you probably, correct me if I'm wrong, but you probably had maybe a little bit more of a different view before your experiences, but your experience reinforced your views around housing in particular. Would you say that's true?
Probably. Like, I remember when we paid off our mortgage, and then after a while, I went to the bank and I said, somebody had said to me about, well, the bank still kind of has a say over your house because of the paperwork. And I said, I want you to discharge my mortgage, I think it's called. And I went into the bank and I said, could you do that, please? And she said, no, don't bother doing that. She said, it's going to cost you a couple of $100 with a lawyer to do that. Just leave that lending facility in place. So that way, if you go out in the weekend and you see a rental property that you want to buy, it's all set up and you're going to save yourself hundreds of dollars. And I was just like, I don't want a rental property. I just spent 5 years paying off the house I've got. I don't want another one. So, I've always been pretty adamant that one house is enough for me. Yeah. They're just too much of a tie and that sort of thing. And like, after blogging all these years and talking to lots of different people, housing in New Zealand it's this default. It's all we've learned. It's like, okay, so you want to make money, Darcy, get a house. Okay, well, you've got a house. That's great. Go and get another one. Go and get another one. And like, even just yesterday, I was talking to a guy. I'm always talking to random people down the street, Darcy. And we got talking. He said, well, what do you do, Ruth? And I told him what I do. And he said, oh, I've had houses. He said, I've flipped a couple of houses. But he said, man, I get sick of it. I just don't like doing it. And he said, but there's no other way to make money. And it's like, well, there actually is. And so he asked me what I do and stuff like that, as far as investing goes and how to make money and that sort of thing. And then he said to me, okay, well, what is if I don't buy houses, what's the fastest way? He wanted the get rich quick. And that's what I find in New Zealand. It's either housing, this long conversation that you're going to have about how to find the right house, how to charge the rent, blah, 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 or get rich quick. And it's just this massive gap in education of showing the different ways to grow your wealth. There's different ways to grow your wealth. It doesn't have to be all housing. And I just come from the point of view of, I just want to be diversified. Christchurch taught me, if you got your largest amount of money in one asset and something goes wrong with it in life, things always go wrong. Everything's always up to change. As you know, you just said to me, you're sitting in a slightly flooded office up there in Auckland. I think you're in Auckland. So to me, I'm about just having a diversified life so that I can pull levers. When one side of the equation falls down a bit, I can pull a lever on the other side and adjust course and keep going. So, yeah.
you're solving the big problem of illiquidity, all that wealth tied up into an asset that can't be divided up by
Mm,
staying out of debt, and presumably you're still out of debt. You don't have a mortgage over the title of your property. You've discharged it on this section that
yeah,
you bought and the land that you built.
yeah,
You never used debt.
yeah.
Okay.
No. So
Um,
when we paid off our house our daughter's 15, and we paid off before she was born, and we've never had a
yeah.
cent of debt since. Yeah. This is
You're,
the thing with debt. It's like I just don't need it. And it's like it took me a while to come to that. Like I held on to a credit card for quite a number of years because it was like, what if something goes wrong? I can charge up 10 grand on my credit card. And then it's like, man, that's the most unsafe thing I could do to myself. If something goes wrong, the last thing I want to do is then be beholden to somebody else to have to pay them back. So
yeah.
yes, systematically turned our back on needing to turn to somebody else to solve our problems,
That's great.
basically.
It sounds like you kind of discovered this for yourself. You probably had a little bit of an angle or propensity towards trying to understand these things, I'm going to guess. Like, would you describe yourself as fairly financially literate before you even bought your home in Christchurch?
I was always interested in money, but I didn't know anything about money. So, like my upbringing, my parents were always very low. They were always low income earners. There were times they really, really struggled, times they got a wee bit flush. But money, my dad always said money's made round to go around. So anytime money came in, it would go back out. That was them. That was how they lived. So so me and money, I was always interested and I was always observing other people, but it
Mm,
took me a long time. I had to work it all out for myself, which I so wished I
mm,
didn't have to, because there's such simple money tricks you can learn from so early on, which would have saved
yeah.
me and so many people the hassle of working it out myself. So I was interested, but I didn't know what to do with that interest.
I get it. So you fed that interest later on. You learned for
Mm,
yourself because you had this
mm,
interest, but the direct experiences that you were having probably reinforced that. I'm going to guess, though, that your family environment probably made you see some things that other people might not see. Would you credit your upbringing, the way your parents dealt with money? Would you credit that as being somewhat of a catalyst for kind of coming to your own money revelations yourself?
It probably pointed me to what I didn't want. Yeah, my parents are great. And I had a lovely upbringing and the likes of that. They just were not overly good with money. And so what I took from that was like I I thought to myself when I was very, very young, when I am a grown up, if I want something, I want the ability to buy it. And I don't know how I'm going to do that. I don't know how that comes to be, but
Mm,
I don't want to want something that I can't have. So
mhm.
somehow I'm going to work my way towards being affluent enough, not that I probably even knew the word affluent then, to make that my reality. Yeah. And so then
Yeah,
all the way along, like, you touch into the lives of so many other people. And I'm just always curious. I've always been curious about other people. And I found out, well, what did they do? What did they do? What did they do? So I took a little bit from everywhere and
yeah.
um and just built upon that basically.
You can, with the podcasts that I've heard of yours, I haven't really read much of your blogs, to be honest, but your podcasts, I know when you first started doing them, that was probably, I loved listening to them. I still occasionally will listen to your podcast because I like the idea that you're getting everyday people sharing a story. Sure, they're not
Mm,
saying it directly, it's through you. So you are curating that story, or drawing it out of them, if you like.
yeah.
But I think we all kind of know just what do everybody else do? What does everybody else do? Is this just me that's going through this, or
Yeah.
how do I rank with everybody else? Because
Yeah.
it's not that we should be living our lives based on what everybody else is doing, but sometimes it just helps with our sanity, right? Like, what should I
Yeah.
be doing now? What does everybody else do? Do you find that that's
Mm.
kind of what drives you?
Yeah. And the whole point of that podcast is never for people to listen and go, oh, I'm better than them or anything like that. It is purely to compare because nobody talks about it. Like
I know.
nobody talks about the day-to-day money stuff. And that's from a privacy point of view. And then also from it's just a lot of it's not very interesting. So,
Mm,
did you renew your insurance this year and actually check what they're going to charge you? It's like nobody wants to bring that up over dinner. So there's a lot of stuff that we've just got into the groove of doing and we do it the way we do it.
in terms of your interactions with people, like, obviously there's going to be enjoyment in what you do. You presumably you like creating, producing content, telling stories. But what is it about having the conversations with the everyday people that you like? Because you're kind of doing something similar that I would do as a financial advisor, but at a completely different level. Not as a
Mm,
financial advisor, but you're doing it as someone who just cares about people, I guess. Is that kind
mm.
of why you're doing it? You care about people in this space?
Yeah, absolutely. When we started the blog, we were like, well, why are we doing this? And we said then, and it remains true today, I just want to help people. So that primarily that's what I'm all about. And so we said, let's just see if we can help people by me sharing my story and what I spent on groceries last week, or what we spent on a holiday, or how much we have invested and how many bank accounts we have. If that helps other people, awesome. And if somewhere along the line the blog and podcast makes some money, well, that's nice as well, but that's not our primary motivation. And the
Yeah.
day that becomes our motivation is the day we'll quit, because I'm not interested in that. So it is primarily to help people, and it's because I have had enough conversations with people where I've just said something extremely basic, like car insurance. What'd you pay on your car insurance last year? $900. Okay. You realize you're going to get a 900 and something dollar bill in 12 months' time. Maybe if you set aside something every week that will get you to $900 in a year's time, that will take the pressure off you. And people are like, oh, mind
Yeah.
blown, sinking funds, something as simple as sinking funds. So I keep saying things I thought were simple. And then people would come back to me and they'll go, just checking in, Ruth. I did this thing and now we've achieved this. And I feel so much better. I feel so much in control. I'm lighter and that sort of thing. So I just like my blog and all the conversations I have, incredibly positive space, incredibly. Like it's not like there's so many people out there in New Zealand that make good money. They just don't know what to do with it. And so with a little bit of help and direction, they feel in control of their money. And so to me, that's
Mm.
like, that's all the payment I need. That's just amazing. And every day I get emails like that from, I got one yesterday, a guy said, I've been listening to your podcast, and he actually started investing, and I'm 6 months in and this is what I've achieved. And so how cool is that? That he listened to everybody else's story. He then decided what he wanted to do for himself, and he put something in action. And now he's been investing quite a significant amount of money for 6 months. And he's completely in control. Like he's loving it. So that's great.
It's pretty amazing, isn't it? You're building
Yeah.
wealth through just people. You're building wealth through
Yeah.
people, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
to be motivated just to help people without being burdened by it, because I'm guessing that you are also probably energized by helping people, not burdened by it. Would that be true?
No, you're right. Completely. Yeah. I get I get a huge buzz out of it every morning. I get up early, I open my emails, and I'm
Yeah.
hit by different people all over the country. Some people I've emailed since I started the blog. So they've
Yeah.
let me into their life, and
Yes.
and I've seen the progress they make. And then in turn, I learn from them. It's like I learn from them things I can add to my own journey, because
Yes.
once you've got
Yeah.
your money sorted, so everything just becomes so much easier.
Fix the foundations, you can build something awesome. So
Yeah.
what is it then about where you're at right now that you enjoy the most in terms of the investing space? Like I'm going to guess that you're probably a fan of low cost passive investment vehicles like index funds. What are you into? If you can share any specifics, that would be awesome. But what are you into? What makes you excited about investing?
I love watching it grow.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
like
So it's
that.
like yeah,
So,
the quantitative side.
yeah,
Yeah.
so what am I into? I mean, my whole financial life, our financial life is I'm into just simplicity. And see, you'll know this. You talk to a huge range of different people. It's really easy to tap into some information from a person, from a business, and go, oh, I want to do that now. Oh, I want to. Then you read another book. Oh, I'm going to do that now, which I did in the beginning. And in my blog in the beginning, I signed up to everything, all these investing platforms, and because I just wanted to try stuff out. And then over time, I just narrowed my focus and realized that simple is key. And not only as simple as key, but I track my net worth first of every single month. I note down the value of each of our investments, our KiwiSaver, our bank accounts. And now I can look back last month, last year, for the last 5, 6, 7 years, and I can see that the things I've done mean I'm worth more today than I was last month and the last year. So the more I invested, the more things I tried, I got to see things fail, like getting into satellite ETFs and stuff like that. And it's just narrowed us down. So what do I enjoy investing in? I've got my house, which I own, which it is an investment, but I track it separate to my net worth. We're both in KiwiSavers. Our daughter's in KiwiSaver. We pay into 2 ETFs. Ta-da! That's pretty much it, And
Simple.
then in our bank,
Yeah.
we keep a big store of cash. So in the bank, I've got at any one time between $20,000 and $30,000, and that encompasses our emergency fund, which sort of
Yeah.
floats between 12 and 16 grand. And then the rest
Yeah.
of that money is just sinking funds, saving up for, the pets, the cars, the holidays, the tax to pay, and all those different things. So our
Yeah.
I've got 1 or 2 other wee things, but truth be told, if I wasn't blogging, I wouldn't have them.
A couple of KiwiSavers, a couple of ETFs, equity in the home, track it separately, and then you have sinking funds for everything that you see coming up, plus your emergency fund. And that's pretty much it. Nice and simple, right?
That's pretty much it. And the
Yeah.
one breakthrough I had as well is in New Zealand, my house is apparently, I looked it up because I knew I was talking to you, it's apparently worth $900,000. That's what it's worth. When I looked it up in January out of interest, it was worth 845. So I don't know who's guessing my house price, but it fluctuates. And what I do in
Yeah.
my net worth, I look at it on the 1st of January, and that's what I lock in for the year. That's what my house is worth. So you talk to anybody, here I am, very blasé. Oh yes, my house is worth $900,000, whatever.
Yeah.
But when we get to investing in our KiwiSavers or other, whether it be a managed fund or an ETF, whatever, people freak out and they're like, oh my God, I've got $5,000 in sharesies. That's a lot of money. Oh, I've got $20,000 in smart shares. Oh, that's a lot of money. I invested long enough to feel comfortable with aiming for $1 million. And so now when I invest in ETFs, I think I'm impatient. That's what I am. I just want them to get to $1 million and be done with it, sort of thing. So now I have no fear with it, and to stop myself having fear with higher numbers, it's like, well, when I first started investing, put my money in each month. When it gets to 10, I'm not allowed to do anything except invest. When it gets to $10,000, I'll reassess. How do I feel? Is it working for me? Do I understand what I'm doing? Have I got the money? Am I putting too much in? Not enough. Reassess. So I did that at 10,000, and I did that at 20,000. I did that at 50,000. I did that at 100,000. And then by taking it in stages, I'm comfortable and to go on, basically. And that's why now I'm impatient. I just want to get to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands. So
Okay, well, let's say you reach your goal though. What next? Do you think you are going to just set another, like a bigger goal, or is that really does something change when you get to whatever number it is that you're aiming at?
When I look at investing, it's just a part of the rest of the life that I'm looking at. And
Yeah.
so, no, we're not reaching for a specific number. We kind of are and we kind of aren't. The 4% rule. So, technically you invest $1 million at 4%, you've got $40,000 a year you can pull out. So that's a number in the back of our mind. But then we live life every day. And so Johnny and I each work 2 days a week now. And so we've got that income coming in each week, which is about, between the two of us, I think it's about $900, and then a bit of money coming in from the blog. And so what I do with our investments is I apply the 4% rule every once in a while. And it's like, oh, well, technically I could take $10,000 a year out of our investments if we wanted to work less, or if we wanted to take a holiday, or if. And so, oh, look, now we could take $20,000 out of our investments if we wanted to. There's no point having this fixed number to aim for, because you've got this life to live in the meantime, and things change all the time. Look, COVID, things change for us. Floods up north, that's just changed for those people up there. Earthquakes, things change for us. So life's so fluid, and I'm about having that good investing schedule and habit and balance and
Mm.
budgeting and managing our money well for
Mm.
where we are at now, but always looking to the future.
On that topic of changes, you mentioned simplicity before around how you invest, and I agree, it's quite simple. That's probably something that you arrived at intentionally, but has there been changes in terms of how you viewed investing or wealth building? Has there been any kind of, oh man, I used to think that, but now I think this? Or have you kind of almost just distilled away the essence of what you really wanted to be doing and got rid of all the stuff around the edges? Like, how did you kind of get to where you're at in terms of the evolution of Ruth Henderson, the investor?
Oh my gosh, that's a hard question. Well, there's no grand plan, Darcy, because there's no point. I talk about the vibe and the direction we want to head in. So
Hmm.
that's, I'm just working on the vibe, like The Castle. That's such a great movie. And so, 2 years, when Johnny was about 46, he said, I want to retire at 50. And we're like, well, what does retirement mean? And so he said, I don't want to work at all. And I said, okay, well, if you don't want to work, what might you like to do? Well, I want to go running. I want to do woodworking. I want to help at school. I want to hang out with our daughter, but I want to travel, all these sorts of things. Okay. So for me, that's a challenge. It's like, okay, well, how can we afford for you to give up work entirely? And so the last couple of years, that's what we've kind of been working towards. And he turned 50 last year. And so we're like, okay, where are we at financially? And it's like, well, actually, you can't quit yet. I'm sorry, because we haven't got enough money. But are you sure you'd want to quit entirely anyway? Going from working to not, I don't know. So long story short, he went off on a period of discovery of, well, what does he want? And it turns out he likes his job. He was working for himself, and working for yourself, there's more to it than just talking to your clients. You've got all that back end stuff to do, and he's just sick of it. So long story short, he approached his biggest client, and now he works 2 days a week for them. So he didn't get to retire outright, but he's pretty happy to go to work on a Tuesday and a Thursday. And
Gotcha.
all the rest of the time, he gets to do all these other things that he likes to do. And then
Yeah.
from a financial point of view, we've still got the money coming in. We're still growing our investments each month. And let's reassess in another year. And it's like, can we afford for him to stop entirely now? Does he want to stop entirely? So, and then from my
Yes.
point of view, I like talking. So for me to quit my job downtown, I'd really miss it. So I don't want to quit. I really like going to work each day. But the day that changes, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
It's not about predetermined plans and rigid goals. It's about just sensing the vibe. It's good. I like that.
Yeah. What our intention is, and like our daughter is in year, help me out here, Darcy, she's year 11, 12, 13. She's
I'm
got
terrible at this
3
sort
more
of
years
stuff.
of school. That when she finishes school at the end of 2025, that's another time for us to reassess. She'll leave home then. There's no university in Otago, and she's looking quite likely that that's what she's probably going to do. No pressure. So at that time, our intention is to sell our house and get all that equity out, go somewhere. Either here, we'll stay and we'll buy a much smaller house, or we'll go somewhere else in the country and buy a cheaper house, and then dump $200,000 to $300,000 into our other investments. And then suddenly we've got you can pull more income off those investments.
Right.
So our intention is to use the equity in our house. I mean, I've never denied that we've made money out of housing. Our house has definitely gone up in value. But while it's all in a house, unless I want to leverage against it, it's unusable. It's kind of feels pointless to me. So that's our intention. 3 years' time, this house goes, and release equity to put it somewhere where it can create a passive income for us, which our house can never do.
That's really cool. And I think that's a lot of New Zealanders will probably have that as the default strategy. They are quite concentrated in their wealth. It's usually always sitting in their home, and maybe there's a little bit of KiwiSaver. KiwiSaver is often the booster rocket.
I see, begrudgingly so often. Like
That's right.
KiwiSaver is going to, I think KiwiSaver is awesome. A lot of people are going to be thankful one day when they get to 65. Although I did meet a man the other week And he got to 65. He pulled it all out and he bought cars. He bought himself his version of classic cars, and it's like, oh God.
You see, I bet you
So
see all sorts though, right? Like,
yeah.
how do you kind of deal with that? Because that, I would imagine that that would pretty much be a full-time job, just answering emails and fielding phone calls. Do you get a lot of people kind of calling in asking you for advice?
Yeah, absolutely. All the time. All the time.
And
But
how
then
do you kind of handle that? Because that would be quite a lot of work, I would imagine.
it is a lot of work. Yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
it's just, I've sort of just got so used to doing it. And I just sort of think, man, if somebody's taken the time to get in touch with me, and I always describe myself as a random woman on the internet, like, and to share with me some personal information in regards to money, man, I've got to show them some respect and give them back a considered response
Mm,
whilst not giving financial advice, because I'm always say I'm not a financial advisor. I've got no financial qualifications. I'm just interested in money and I'll help where I can, but I know my limits. And I'll just send them an email back answering as best I can, and then just providing them links, tools, and resources for them to go and follow up.
mm, yeah,
And then I'll always say in my emails, hopefully I've answered your question today. If I
mm,
haven't, just keep asking. And so
yeah,
that's why these emails go on for so long, that they'll be,
yeah, yeah. I was
oh,
wondering about
could you
that. Yeah,
clarify this? And a lot of it's
yeah,
just simple stuff. It's
yeah. It's pretty
so
cool though, isn't it?
yeah, I
Yeah, it's
answer
pretty cool.
that sort of thing all
Yeah,
day long, because like I kind of think the questions they ask, it's like, well, where else are you going to go? Like if you go to a bank, you're going to get a specific lien on your information, aren't you? If you go to a mortgage broker, well, they're going to talk to you about getting a mortgage, because that's what they sell for a living, sort of thing. So, and then if you go to someone like a financial advisor, the expense of doing so is just out of so many people's league, and I can
yeah,
understand why the price of using a fee only authorized financial advisor, independent authorized financial advisor, is going up and up and up. But that's
mm,
out of most people's league. And so if they're just asking me just good old basic general questions,
yeah.
why wouldn't I answer that? I'm happy to try and
I know.
help.
Well,
So
that's the problem, right? Is like you're not going to get really technically qualified and defined as financial advice unless you're in the market to do some sort of interaction with a product or a service. So if you're
mm,
really just trying to figure out, well, how do I handle my household budget and how do I get better at personal finance? There's not really a lot of enthusiastic support for you. You know what I
mm,
mean? Like to have
yeah,
somebody like
yeah,
you out there in the country that are talking to people and providing content for people to access
mm,
without selling anything and you're not trying to drive an agenda. That's super, super important. So I applaud you for that. It's also rare. I wish that more
mm,
people in our industry, like the financial advice industry, did a version of what you were doing as confidently
mm,
and as enthusiastically as you do, even though there's no revenue in it. Like I'm sure what you make from doing this probably is a fraction of what you could make if you were working full time, but
mm,
the wealth that you're creating, even though it's not in your world, the wealth that you're creating is phenomenal. You can't even see it, right? Like people would have
mm,
listened to you and implemented something and had an amazing result. You
mm,
might not even know about that, right? Like, does that ever kind of hit you sometimes? Like, wow, I've actually done that for that person. They might not
yeah.
realize it, but I've done that.
Well, I respond to every single email I get, and sometimes I'll send back a big response, nothing, crickets. And initially I used to think, Craigie, that's a bit rude. That took me half an hour to write that email. But
Yeah,
then I, to be honest, I send the email and I just let it go these days. And if they respond, they respond. That's great. And then
yeah,
often I will send an email and think, oh, I would have thought I would have heard back from them. But a year later, I'll get an email back, and they're just replying to the one I sent. Now,
yeah,
Ruth, thought I'd give you an update. Boom, 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 boom. And it's just like, gives me goosebumps whenever I think about it. They've just completely put themselves on a better track. And it was just because
yeah,
I sent some information their way for them to follow up on, and they got it done. It's just amazing. It's just
yeah,
amazing. Yeah.
yeah. That's so
It's
cool.
very rewarding. So it's a terrible
Yeah,
business model, but I enjoy it.
yeah,
So but then that comes back down to being financially stable. It's like I can do this because I don't have to make a full-time income. I'm
Yeah.
fortunate that I've worked us into a position. And like I always say, Johnny and I, like I said, what we earn before, we only earn $900 a week, but and some money from the blog, because I do have some affiliates and that sort of thing. So there is income coming in.
Yeah.
But it's just given me the freedom to do what I want to do, which happens to be helping people over a blog.
Yeah.
So
That's so
how cool
cool.
is that?
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's very cool is what I'm going to suggest.
Mm,
So tell me,
mm,
what next then? So we have thehappysaver.com, and then we have the podcast, The Happy Saver, right? So
mhm.
what else? Are we talking about books in the future, movie deals? What next, Ruth?
Yeah, Netflix series coming out soon.
Yeah, why not? That'd be cool.
No, that's it. And so Johnny and I decided relatively early on, we'll focus on our knitting. And so, we used to be, so it is the blog, it is the podcast, very vaguely on Instagram. I really should just shut down Facebook because I'm not interested. There's enough interesting stuff coming at me to keep me occupied. The thought of writing a book, like Johnny says, you should write a book, Ruth. I write a book every week. I write a blog, and that takes so much work to bring that together.
Mm,
That makes me happy for now. So if we pushed it to try to make it be something like it's got to make us this much money each month, it's got to reach an audience of this size, I would lose interest. Yeah.
yeah.
So
Yeah. As soon as it becomes something that you have to do, then it's not a
yeah.
passion anymore, is it?
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I get it.
Yeah. That's
Uh,
exactly it. As soon as I felt obligated to do it, no.
yeah.
And like then as it stands, it's like we went on holiday for a couple of weeks. And so I just went on holiday for a couple of weeks. I didn't put out a blog for a few weeks. And then I came back and I was still in that holiday vibe, didn't quite get back into podcasting. So,
Yeah.
we had a 3-month break or whatever it was. And it's like, well, that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
Mm.
No, that's cool. So as we finish up, what would be the one, if you were to choose just one of the key messages that you would really love everyday people just to know that you wish you knew a lot sooner, what would it be?
I think pay attention. Money matters more than you think. And then I would say to people, know your net worth. And so, first of every month, sit down, write down where your money is, and write down
Mhm.
what you owe. And then every month, you should be trying to get incrementally better. So,
Mm.
growing your net worth. Budget your income and your expenses. And by that, I don't mean, don't buy that bottle of wine, go without blah, blah, blah. It's just know where your money is coming from and going to, and
Yeah.
spend where you find meaning. And don't waste money. Don't just waste money. Next, I'd always have an emergency fund without fail. And that is, as you know, 3 to 6 months of your expenses. And it just reduces stress. And like there's this particular woman I've been emailing for years called, and I've never met her. I don't know that much about her, except we've emailed for years, and our subject line is always keep going, Joe, because she
Okay.
is clearly a very low income earner. She was in lots of debt, and just always struggle. So for years we've been emailing back and forwards, and she's just got better month by month by month by month by month. And she emailed me last week and she had a wee slip up, but it's like, keep going, Joe. And so she's gone from being in debt to now being in the positive. And now when emergencies happen to her, she's solving her own problems.
Mm.
So it's just so
That's
rewarding
cool.
to watch. And so I talked about her because she's building up her emergency fund now. And she got to use it because something happened. She paid for it. No problem, And so
Yeah.
watching her just have this calmness about her is so
Yeah.
motivating. It's very
Oh,
cool.
yeah.
So I'd say that.
Peop Yeah.
I'd say join KiwiSaver, low cost fund, passive fund, get out of debt, stay out of debt, and then invest your socks off. That's what I'd say.
Yeah. That's good. I only asked for one, but you gave me like what, 12 things? That's
I
great. What a
told you
bonus.
I talk a lot, Darcy. Yeah.
That's good
but
value.
then but
That's
then
good.
I'll finally say, but that's the thing with money. There's no, like the guy I talked to down the street who's like, I'm sick of housing. How can I make money? Quick, tell me the thing. There is no one thing. It's just there is
Yeah.
and it's different for everybody. It's just making small positive actions every single day. And if you make one that's not quite right, just don't do it twice. trust your own instinct and stop reading and start doing, because we all look for to learn something else to solve our problem. Particularly when you get to my age, I know enough to just think about what I can do for myself. And so stop trying to outsource your money
Yeah.
management. You've got the skills
Mm,
to do it yourself. And that's what I say to a lot of people that I email. It's like, read this, watch that, learn this, do that, and now turn everything off, look at
mm,
your household situation, and
mm.
you get to make the positive moves.
I think you use the term outsourcing, or
Mm,
in my world, it's kind of like outsourcing the effort. Well, you can learn about that sort of stuff. But once you learn it, you really have to take it and run with it and make it your own. Otherwise, you become dependent on all these
yeah,
things to do it for you. And no
yeah,
one's going to do this for you. You have to do it yourself. So people want to help
mm,
you, but they don't want to be doing it for you all the time, right? Because
yeah,
it doesn't spark joy in your life as the helper or as the
mm,
helpee if
mm,
you have to be depending all the time on somebody else. But it's such
yeah.
an important thing to do. Do you ever struggle with that? Like, do you find that people sometimes become a little bit dependent on Ruth and what should I do now type thing?
No, it's not too bad because
That's good.
because it's free what I do. I get to be quite blunt, and
Yeah.
so I'll just say, stop mucking around, just get on with it.
Yeah, that's right. That's a great place to finish. Awesome, Ruth. So thehappysaver.com, or just search for The Happy Saver wherever you listen to podcasts. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct. Well done. Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. Awesome. Well, thank you very much. I think I reached out to you probably about 3 years ago saying, hey, at some stage we should do a podcast, but that was 3 years ago. So thank you for your patience and thank you for agreeing finally to come on. Not that you were saying no, but it was more
Yeah.
me. It was all me, not you, Ruth. Anyway,
I've always
thanks for
known. I think we said at the time, "Oh, we'll get connected one day." So no, it's nice to
yeah.
finally have a chat to you.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time.
Awesome. All right. Thank you. So we'll catch you on the next one. Cheers, Ruth.
Okay, thanks. See you.